shot everyone he came here to shot, and his work was done. So he was successful in his attack. And so Denise Van Amberg, she was 28. She was an accountant clerk. She had 2 children who were 3 and 6, Jessica and Brian. She was killed by Miller, and she was the 3rd person to be shot. So when Miller entered the room, he shot the supervisor of the office, Florence Pike, first, and then crossed over and shot the other 3 women. So Nancy Wheeler, straight out of Stranger Things, guys. She's 48. She was also an accounting clerk and was killed by Miller. She has 3 children, and she was also married. Phyllis was the child support investigator, and he was one of her main targets because she was the one who determined how much money would be taken out from people's accounts and who would be paying for child support based off of what the court ruled. And so she was the child support investigator who determined that Miller was in fact the father of his child. So she was divorced and she had 3 children, and her main focus, she claimed that as a child support investigator, her job was to be an advocate for the children. So she was very against Miller's idea of not paying child support. She was also a nurse, and she worked with health indications, and they loved her a lot. And then Florence Pike, she was the supervisor of the office. She was 60. She was also murdered by Miller a few days before she was planning to retire. And she was the one who met him first because he came into the office the day before the shooting and talked to them. And she made a comment to one of her neighbors through a form of dark humor about how he came into the office to kill them all and how she said that he wanted to kill himself. And she kind of laughed it off and moved on and moved on with that. So Miller killed them, and this wasn't really a random act. This was all planned. So each of these women he targeted and killed, and there was no accidental killings in this shooting.
So, for pre-attack information, our pins are incident indicators. So, firstly, he was convicted of felonious charges when there was a domestic violence call at one of his prior girlfriend's house. I don't think it was the one that had the kid that claimed it was his, but there was an officer called in for a domestic violence call at her house, and he ended up pointing a gun at 2 officers, and so that gun was purchased in 1982, and he was convicted of the charges later that year, but somebody sucked at their job because he wasn't supposed to have that gun later, but he still had it at the time of the shooting, which was years later, and that should have been removed from him after he was convicted of those charges, because in the state of Ohio, he wasn't allowed to have that after he was convicted. So that happened. And then another pre-attack information type thing. He said that the child support payments had ruined his life, and there's a lot of accounts of him saying this to multiple people continually. So his boss said that he said this, some of his coworkers, the people in the office that he killed, his ex-girlfriend that had the kid allegedly with him. There was never actually a paternity test conducted, so we don't actually know if it was his kid or not. So yeah, he continually expressed that his life was ruined by all these payments that he was forced to give, and he was always backed up on payments. They forcefully took money from him all the time because he just refused to pay. He'd gone to jail multiple times for it. Can you get that for me, please? Thank you. So another pin is that he purchased a one-way bus ticket. So he left, how far was the drive? Was it 3 hours is what it said? So it was a 3-hour drive, but he took public transportation, didn't take his own car, and he just purchased a one-way ticket, and so that was interesting, and there was a reason for that, obviously. And when he arrived, it actually says that when he talked to the people at the motel that he stayed in for the night. He went the day prior, I guess, and went into the office and then spent the night, and then the next day is when he carried out the attack. But I guess when he went to the motel, he lied to the people about having car troubles, because they questioned well, why'd you bring a bus? Because you have, and he's like, oh, I had car troubles and it broke down. So that was another interesting thing. He visited the venue prior to the attack, so he kind of had a chance to scope it out and talk to the people, and it was interesting because I almost feel like if they would have handled it better, he might have stopped. But you know, it is what it is, I guess. He informed his boss before he left that he had a quote problem to straighten out in the town that he was going to. It was like Schuyler County. I don't remember how to Schuyler. I can't pronounce it. I was like, I don't know how to say it. So he told him specifically like the place that he had a problem to straighten out. Which was also interesting because his boss knew he had like troubles with the people in that office there. And then he had 4 prior arrests within a span of 10 years for not paying child support, and then for the incident at his ex-girlfriend's house where he pointed a gun at 2 officers. So yeah, and he believed that the child was not his. Like throughout all of that, he was adamant that the kid was not his. Kid was not his. Kid was not his. But he refused to go through with a paternity test, which was interesting. We're not really sure why, but.
So the situation description, so he's an attorney, as we just said, but it was unclear how much he owed, but I think it was, he owed about 26 years worth of child support, which is a lot, the day before the shooting, he visited the support collection unit and he told Florence Pike that he was suicidal, and he was considering suicide, and he blamed these women for ruining his life, even though he couldn't find a wife. I don't know what that has to do with paying child support, finding a wife, but it was one of his problems, and he blamed them for not being able to find another job as well. And when $51 was deducted from his paycheck, he told her because he was traveling to New York to settle the matter. So I'm guessing that was like the last straw for him. He was just done. Yeah. The attack description. So Mr. Miller visited the social work department the day before the attack. He then returned the next day to the office at approximately 10 a.m. carrying a briefcase and a duffel bag full of ammunition. He entered the office and he began shooting. And one after the other, he paused once to tell a woman working that she could leave, which indicated that he was only there to hurt his targets. And when he was done, and when the police confronted him, he stood in the hallway holding a gun against his head. He was very calm and cooperative, and he told them that he was, well, no one could help him. He carefully put down an envelope that contained a letter that explained what he did. And then he walked in a circle once and then shot himself in the head. He was then taken to hospital and he was pronounced dead at 10:41. Yeah, 10:41 a.m. And all 4 women died immediately.
Okay, back to intended violence. So, Grievous Miller, he didn't like how his paycheck was reducing because he didn't pay his child support, and he's not even, the child is not even his, and he said it was hard for him to get a job or a wife. And I think I understand it because I wouldn't want to marry a guy with no money. So a little bit I can understand. And so he owed more than $6,000, and he didn't have that much money because he didn't pay child support. He was arrested several times, and because of that, he has a bad record, so he can't get a job. And then he thought that violence is necessary, and so he planned to kill those who was responsible for the child support payment. For his research and planning, he researched his targets, 4 women in the support collection unit. Emma already it. And he bought a one-way bus ticket. He also planned his suicide attack. He wrote a letter. It was 2 pages, and it's a letter explaining what he did, what he did. And he planned to kill just the ones responsible for the child support bill, and then kill himself. For his preparation, he acquired a 9mm semi-automatic pistol and ammunition. And some of his final acts was writing a 2-page letter explaining what he did. And the night before, he drank 8 to 10 beers. I mean, that shouldn't be something like suicidal. The breach, he visited the social services department the day before the attack and told the people there that he is considering suicide, but the woman there thought it was just joking. And while there, there was no security at the collection unit, so it was easier for him to attack the next day. And the attacks, he shot 4 victims with 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and they all died immediately, and they all were responsible for his child support payment.
And these were sources. Where are you from?
So the office manager told a neighbor about the encounter with him the day before. What was the neighbor told?
So the neighbor was told by Florence Pike that she basically went up to him and said, like, this man was in the office and he threatened to commit suicide. And she kind of laughed it off. She was like, well, we don't really know if he's going to do anything, kind of get that all the time since people come in a lot to complain about child services. She didn't think much of it.
From what I gather, it was like, kind of like, how was work today? Well, some guy came in and threatened to commit suicide. Like, from what I gather, it was that kind of thing. Just like casual, this interesting thing happened at work today.
Okay, so they didn't take it as necessarily ominous.
No. Which was a mistake on the car.
Did you see any video or photos of the area of the space where he perpetrated the attack? Okay. Was there any information that indicated that there were barriers between the public and the workers at all that he had to reach?
Based on the information that we received from the articles that we read, there was a hallway and there were several other doors, and it seemed to be the supervisors were on one side and the workers were on the other, because he went into one office, shot Florence Pike, and then crossed the hallway to shoot the other 3 women. And the offices were close together because several women were in the other offices that were nearby, and while they were running, he told them that you can leave, like, I'm not here to hurt you, and as people were evacuating, he actually said to them calmly, like, it's okay, I'm not here to hurt you, like, you can evacuate, like, you don't have to run. Because he was only focused on those 4 targets, and he wasn't intending to hurt anybody else.
It seems like every department kind of had like their own like room and pod and like, so.
And we also, the letter was never released to the public, so we don't have
Yeah.
any copy or record of what was exactly said, we just know that it was about what he did based on what he said.
Were there any lawsuits filed?
I'm actually unsure. I don't know. I don't think so. But.
Well, they're all workers, which means work comp probably covered it.
Well, he's dead, so.
Well, I mean, estates get sued too,
Yeah.
but it sounds like you don't have much.
I don't.
Everybody, from basically with the information we received, everybody was kind of just shocked by it, and everybody kind of just.
Yeah, they said it never happened there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh,
There go Nikki.
You guys are next.
Wait, is that ours? No, that's theirs.
Wait, I logged out.
Yeah, whose is that?
That's mine.
Hey, can you log off from there, please? Please, Jim?
I swear I logged out.
Oh, well, apparently not. Just kidding.
Hey.
Yeah, heck. No, because they can just add accounts, that's why. Wait, calm, not coin.
It says.
But not ours. Is it ours?
Yeah, we'll come up with questions that we think people should answer about.
Like the cancer situation.
Yeah, kitty.
Maybe she is
Can we ask? Yeah, toma. Apple wine. Fifty cents.
Okay.
Or something.
All right, aloha, brothers and sisters.
Aloha.
My name is Takehite. With group 3, I think. And our topic is based on the University of Iowa shooting. First of all, I'm going to explain the victims. As you can see here, these are the victims. At the top, on this side, is Chris K. Curtis. And the other one in the middle
They're
is
all-
Twilight. Dwight
except for
R.
one.
Nixon.
Glasses.
Big Hua Sam, and Mia Roberts, and T.N. Cooley. So these are the victims.
Cleary.
And a brief explanation for the victims is Mia is a 23-year-old temporary student. Leo Shang, born in China. He earned his PhD in University of Iowa. He was the winner of the got the award as a scholarship. And Robert Allen Smith was born in Boston, and he attended the University of Iowa in 1989, and as an associate professor. Dwight, he was a faculty member in the university in 1978, and also his PhD in plasma physics. And Christopher, he was attended the university in 1973 and a full-time professor in Iowa University. And the last one, she's a vice president for the academic affairs. Next, I'm just gonna explain the suspect. The suspect, his name is Ken Lu. He was 21 years old in that time. This person is self-centered person. Self-centered.
What is his name again, please?
Ken Lu.
Spell.
Ganglu.
Thank you.
And yeah, he's a self-centered person. He was kind of like only think about himself. He always like find himself in the university, and he's one of the top students in the University of Iowa.
Okay, so what brought these people together? The first point I put up there is like passion for physics. So what Tiki was sharing about our instigator is Kang Lu from China. He was known as most gifted, intelligent person like in this field of physics. So he won a scholarship to the University of Iowa. A little bit more of like his relationship towards his targets. We believe that the beginning of his grievances towards his targets was because he did not won the TC Spitzer-Beck dissertation prize, including the monetary money over here that amounts to $2,500. Like back then, this is a huge amount of money. The information in the bracket says just like they named the president of the University of Iowa named this award prize after a person that was considered very hardcore supporter to the university. He died at the age of 94. He was a huge contributor to the University of contributing in so many departments, including the field that Kang Lu was very interested in. So Kang Lu was also like one of his victims was actually his former roommate. They were in the same apartment, but because of his bad temper, he was not also a bad tempered person. He was a loner too, and he was warned by the owner of the apartment to the one of the victims, Lin. I'm just gonna use the last name, Sean and Lu. Lu was the instigator. Sean is a former roommate. So he was warned to go and look for another apartment, because if you guys are arguing in an apartment, something might happen. He's gonna ruin my apartment with all this stuff. So I'm just gonna read out a quote by some of his classmates at the university. A student said said Kang was very silent and very determined. He was not popular with other students. So we can see here that Mr. Lu was gifted in mind and studying, but was not in social life. And he was really working hard to win this prize, because in some of the articles it says that it was hard for him to find a job when he graduated with his doctoral degree. So it was a huge moment for him, because he considered himself to be the best of all the other students that was competing for this award. And so the three of his victims, the picture, three of them, Professor, sorry guys, can you just go back to the picture? Okay, I'm just gonna point it out. So 1, 2, 3, three of them were part of his dissertation on comedy. Comedy, I watched too much comedy. Committee, sorry. And also, he, after the university released the winner, which is the former roommate, he was very devastated. And after that, he also filed complaint about that he was supposed to be nominated as the winner for the prize, but he wasn't. So this lady over here, Dr. Cleary, was at the time the head of department of the academic affair. She ignored his letter of complaints and stuff. So this is another addition for his grievances prior to the attack. And this was here is the receptionist of Dr. Cleary at the time, prior to the university. She was shot for no reason. And she was the only survivor after the attack, and recently passed away 10 years ago. So those are the relationships between our instigator, Mr. Lu, towards his targets.
The pre-attack information, I looked up pre-incidents, as we learn in classes to look for pre-incidents that could lead to the pathway to intended violence. So the pre-incidents that I took out was people knew him to be temperamental, angered by what he saw as unfair treatment by faculty members and administrations, specifically the physics department. He had grievances with them because of the scholarship that he did not get from them. He had grievances with the school. He had psychological problem with being challenged. This added a lot of pressure on him. So this is not really documented on as a medical, but this is from people that he knew. His friends said that he had a hard time of being challenged. For someone to challenge him, he sees that as a threat, and he has a hard time of accepting the challenge. So one of his friends said that he is the number one. For Mr. Kang Lu, he looked at himself as the number one, no one else but him. And another pre-incident indicator was that he wrote an appeal letter to revoke the student scholarship. So his former roommate, Sean, he wrote an appeal letter to the physics department for them to revoke that scholarship and give it to him. So he bluntly said that, and I think that is something that they should have taken into consideration. And he wrote 5 letters outlining his plans and reasons of his attack. 4 of these letters were meant to go to news organizations. And in his letters it states the names of the people he killed, he was going to kill, and also the reasons why he did the attack. And this was done prior to his shootings. In the weeks before the murders, he emptied his bank accounts. So he did this, and he sent all his money to his sister who's in China. And he wrote a note to her of what he should do with it, what she should do with this money and where it should be spent. And so these pins in the indicators, which oh, there is no, can you go back? Go. All right. The pathway to intended violence. Okay. The first one is grievances. I found 3 points that highlights his grievances. One, he believed the scholarship that went to Shan Lin Hua, a rival student, should have been his. Okay, the scholarship was given by the physics department. Also the prize money, which is worth $2,500. This could have helped him as a student, and just the prize on itself could have given him recognition in resume, and that would have given the opportunity to find work.
So his targets were former co-workers of his that were all in that trailer at the time. This is the best picture we could find, and I'm sorry, we don't know who's who because it wasn't labeled correctly. But we know what their names were. They're Leland Brookins, Tim Clifford, Mark Bent, Kenneth Branches, and and Moon, Don Moon. So, starting with the order we've got here, Leland Brookins was shot twice. He was shot in the abdomen and back. He did not die. He actually pretended to be dead. He was shot once, fell down, pretended to be dead, was shot again on the ground, and continued somehow to pretend to be dead while getting shot. And then later was saved when the police arrived. He did, however, die in 2006 as a result of complications due to a surgery that was trying to fix these wounds. Clifford, Branches, and Moon were all killed on the scene. The most interesting thing from these other men that were killed is that Branches had actually never met McCree. He was hired fairly recently, and so did not remember him, wasn't there at the time that McCree had been working for the city.
That's why we fixed
So, kind of one more thing, just amongst the dead was also one of McCree's supervisors, and so that, previous or former supervisors. This is actually Clifton McCree. He was about 40-something years old, 44 years old when the incident occurred. And for 18 years, he worked as the beach cleanup maintenance crew for the city of Fort Lauderdale. He was fired in December 1994 for drug use. He was under the influence of marijuana countless number of times. He was also, we'll go more into our presentation, but he was also threatening his co-workers and also very rude to the customers that they had. He was also married with kids, 2 boys and 1 girl, former Marine. He served he was in 2 years in Camp Pendleton, which is in California, and that's where he ranked up from all the way to Lieutenant Corporal. Yeah, so he also had no previous criminal record before this, and so I guess something that wasn't on here as well is that I read that he also had a pretty troubling childhood. Mom wasn't there, dad left and dug out, mom slept with a bunch of guys, passed him around from house to house, and there was a lot of in-between details that added to the way that he was with his own family, which was pretty strict with his kids. They were at home by 6, in bed by 9, no question about it, no answers. All the neighbors had claimed that their kids were well behaved and never had any complaints about them.
Okay. So for the pre-attack information, he was fired, like everybody mentioned, from his job due to a failure of a drug test. And he also, quote unquote, joked about coming back to kill his coworkers. If anybody were to mess with his job, he'd come back and he'd kill them. Unfortunately, people took that as a joke and thought he wouldn't really do anything. And then violent outbursts as well. I mentioned he made threats to his coworkers, and he did vow to come back. So if somebody jokes about killing themselves or killing you, don't take it lightly. And he also threatened students who bullied his son, which was he's very protective. Other factors were that he was rejected from other jobs that he tried to apply for. None of them would call him back, and he was under the influence that because of the job he was fired from, a lot of other companies or jobs heard about it and they didn't want to hire him. And he was also fired again. He was hired as a security guard for a while, but that didn't last too long. And he just felt that because everybody was out to get him, he wouldn't be able to progress in life. And he still continued to use drugs, marijuana. And there was also a stress test that we kind of conducted as a group, and his score came out to 571, which is very high given that it's the norm or the highest is 300.
So the pathway to intended violence, so his grievance was that he was fired. He thought that it was due to an economic lynching. He, like I mentioned earlier, he said that his coworkers were racist devils. And he used some very vulgar words to explain them. And so then his violent ideation was that he continued to make threats to coworkers. They were always involved coming back and shooting them or anyone who would mess with him. He knew their schedules very well. He had worked with all except one of these men. And he bought the guns to commit his attack. And obviously he planned the day he was gonna go. He got the guns ready and he just headed over to their little trailer. He entered his former workplace armed, and then he opened fire on all of the coworkers that were in there having a meeting.
So it's interesting. It's kind of hard for us to talk about his planning and preparation phase because during that time, his wife actually reported that he was just kind of locked in his room and didn't really talk to anyone, didn't go out with the kids anymore. So we don't know a lot of what was going on in his head, and the suicide note that he left was really hard to piece together parts of it. It was supposed to have been released, but we never found a full copy. These are actually a couple of statements that happened after the fact that were collected, and we thought it was just interesting to present this at least. Alice Brookins is the sister of one of the victims, and she commented that Brookins, who was killed, had told her, if I don't come out of this, you sue the city because I've been telling them for a year and a half that this man was going to do this. So this was kind of leading up to the event. At least there was some form of communication between Brookins and McCree. And then after the event, the mayor actually said the whole city's grieving right now. It's a horrible tragedy. We all feel the pain. Sometimes there are tragedies that happen that just can't be prevented. We thought it was really interesting to look at the dichotomy between these two statements, that it seems like Brookins knew it was happening, and that actually through statements given by other coworkers who weren't there at the time, kind of everyone knew that this had been coming, that they had been worried about it. They mentioned that he had threatened to do so, but nothing had really taken place. No one had really done anything about it. And then, of course, the mayor says this couldn't have been prevented.
Something to add to that real quick is the fact that leading up to this termination from the company, the coworkers did finally come out and pose their fears. They were very afraid to go to their authorities to manage the situation, so there was a sense of fear held amongst the coworkers. So with the attack, again, there's the trailer the blue and white trailer that was a temporary office that he entered into. Actually, the day before, he actually tried to interview and reapply for his job and was again denied. And so the very next morning, he knew their schedule, 5 a.m. They were in there planning their day, and he entered in and said the very vulgar words, "I'm going to kill all you mother beavers." And entered in with a semi-auto, a 9mm, unloaded a 10-round case or 10-round magazine, popped in another one, popped 3 more shots, and shot himself. On his hip, he also had an extra pistol. I believe it was a 38mm caliber or something like that. But it was another gun that was on his hip that was never used in this situation. Together, he worked again with his coworkers, and like I said before, one of those coworkers was his former supervisor. I believe the one that had fired him in that situation, or had led up to the firing, or had part in that.
then just a continuation of the situation and the attack. So Nancy Ehlers, Ehlers, she escaped through the back door, and she actually went to call 911. And McCree, well, we already said that, he ended up taking his own life. And so they found a suicide note on him. And like Jake said, it was kind of hard to piece together because we didn't find the actual document, but this is kind of what we would assume it would look like. So basically, to punish some of the cowardly racist devils, all the hope, effort, and opportunity at employment only proved to be futile. Thank you. After being terminated by the city of Fort Lauderdale, the economic lynching without regard or recourse is something very evil. Since I couldn't continue to support my family, life became nothing. I'm glad I did it. And that was what we assumed to be his final statement.
Question. You said that shortly before this happened, the workers were worried and told brought their fears forward to whom?
To the supervisors.
Supervisors, the city,
And to
family, family members, friends.
And what do you know about what the supervisors of the city did?
I know that in the reports they disregarded most of the threats that he had because they were saying like over the 18 years he was, or majority of this 18 years he served as a really good employee. Besides the fact every now and then he made threats, and so it said that the supervisors usually brushed over it and said, just kind of like dusted it under the rug.
There was actually an interview that he had with a higher up supervisor from the city of Fort Lauderdale, in which he was asked about his threats. And he said, oh, I was just fooling around. I can't believe those guys would say that about me. It's really, they should know better. They know me better than that. They know it's not something I would do.
Thank you very much. Okay. Saving the best for Hi, everyone.
Oh. Yeah,
Wait,
the other one.
Malu, it's only you two?
There's three of us, but she's sick.
Oh. So sad. Tell her to Skype.
So we only have 5 minutes, right?
You wish.
End it whenever you want to.
You can end that in 1 minute.
That's when you're way too old too. Georgia.
You guys, the rest of you guys come up with questions to me. Okay. 3 questions, right?
Yeah.
Just from the group.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Aloha.
So my name is Manu,
Emmanuel.
and the other one is Taylor. Yeah, we worked together on the paper, and she's very sick. So instead, we're gonna do our best today to present you Georgia Man Killing Spree Takes 13 Lives. So on that picture, the instigator is the baby. No, just kidding. It's the dad. So his name is Mark Barton, and you guys are gonna learn about what led Mark Orin Barton to kill his wife, 2 children, and 9 others in late July 1999.
I know this.
Okay, so here's the timeline of the events. On July 26, 1999, he called his lawyer and changed the will. So first of all, he called his lawyer and changed the will to his kids, leaving everything to his children. And then later on, within that same week, he called his lawyer again and told him to change the will to leave everything to his mother. To his mother. And then on July 27, 1999, he lost $20,000 in stocks, and that is the main grievance for him to go on a killing spree. And first, he killed his second wife, which was a second victim for his murders, Leigh Ann. And then on July 28, 1999, he took kids for haircuts and then murdered them. So this is falls into the category of planning, because one of his mother said during that evening when he saw Mark Barton that she felt something was amiss but didn't know what it was, and that's the same night that he took his kids to get haircuts, and when they were in bed, he killed them. July 28, 1999, called his mom, who said something was off but wasn't sure what it was, and then on the 29th, that's when he called his lawyer, asked for his children to be buried next to their mother, and for all of his possessions to be passed to his mother, whatever.
Okay, so as you can see, there were different events, right? The wife killed the kids, then he went to his former company and killed more people. So let's talk about his description. So Mark Braden, he was 44 years old. So much was that, I think. He was a Caucasian male, 6 feet 4 inches, 220 pounds. His past history, he doesn't really have a criminal record, but he did have history with drugstores. One time he went to drugstores, stole something, but he wasn't charged for that. He did have history with drug use and also with mental illness. In school, he didn't have much friends. He was mostly alone. Right? Then later, he married his first wife, Deborah. And apparently, there's no evidence that he murdered her, but she was murdered along with her mom in 1993. Yeah, they were murdered. And soon after the murder, he married his second wife, Leigh Ann, who was also murdered in 1999. But just about that, the investigators that worked on the first murder of his first wife in 1993, they found blood, right? They found evidences against him, but it wasn't, wasn't good enough to prove that he was the murderer. So yeah, he was clean for that. Okay, then yeah, he married Leigh Ann. He kept his children with him, and then he joined company day trading. And now we go to the next slide. Okay. Right. So here are the names of the victims. All right. So at the top we have the family. Leigh Ann, she was 27 years old. So that's almost my age. It used to be my age. She's okay. So I cannot feel a connection with her. Then Matthew was 11. Michelle was 8. And then the next, after murdering them the next day, he went to Alltech Investment Group. He used to work there, but at that time he wasn't working there anymore. And at that place, the victims were Alan Charles Tenenbaum, 48, day trader, Dean De La Walla, 52 years old, and Charles F., 62 years old, Chamish, 45 years old, 44 years old, And after killing them, he went across the street, across that building, to kill people from a different company. Edward, Kevin, Russell, and Scott. So the relationship that these people have with him, right, it's quite obvious. Some of them have worked with him, in the same office, and the way that they describe Norman is he was a scout leader. He was a churchgoer, so a very religious man. He would praise God often. He even put God's name in his suicide letter.
Okay, so here are the pre-indicators life events history. First of all, he was arrested for burglary. He was arrested at age 14 and 20 when he broke into a drugstore and stealing drugs or prescription drugs. And while he was working at a company which was founded by him and his friends, he was fired, and then he broke into the office and he stole files and formulas, and then he erased all computer hard drives, damaging some of the equipment. Second one was he was a very controlling husband. Barton was mean and controlling, who do not allow his wife to do anything without his permission, and routinely referred to her as stupid. A former secretary recalled Martin heartlessly belittling his wife to co-workers when she had a miscarriage. Also cheating on his wife. While he was married to Deborah, he had an affair with Leigh Ann when she was 21, and which shows that he's very mindless and he doesn't really care about his wife. And then he was a prime suspect of the murder of his first wife, Deborah, and his mother-in-law, Deborah's mother. A man in Alabama witnessed that he saw a man that matched Barton's description, asking for directions to the lake where Deborah and her mother were camping. And even though he claimed he was home in Atlanta with the children, the police proved that there was enough time for him to drive back before the children awoke. And as he was saying, there was blood evidence found in his car. He claimed that the blood belongs to him and it was from a finger cut. But when the police asked for a DNA test, he refused to take the test, and he refused to take the lie detector test. And he had homicidal thoughts as well.
So the investigators, they sent him to a psychologist to see his mental health. Oh, cool. So the psychologist did say that he is capable, he has homicidal thoughts. Yeah, so if a doctor says it, then it's legitimate.
Yeah. So what happened here is his daughter, when she had a daycare, she reported that her father, had sexually abused her, and so there were psychologists investigating the situation, but it the report proved that there was no evidence of sexual abuse, but he had homicidal thoughts, or it was and this has the pre-attack information. Investigators for Deborah's death warned Leigh Ann against Barton. They told Leigh Ann that after when Barton get tired and sick of her, he'll kill her, and that's exactly what happened. But Leigh Ann didn't listen to him. He had suicidal thoughts, and he blamed others for his circumstances. On a note that he wrote when the police found the bodies of his wife and two kids in the home, he wrote that he didn't plan to live long enough, but long enough to kill all those who sought his destruction. And his main grievance was a financial loss, which he lost $450,000 in a stock trading, internet stock trading. And this is the path to upset violence. The grievance, he was upset about financial losses. Ideation, he killed his daughter's cat at work. He called his wife, Lei Ann, and told her that he has suicidal thoughts. But when he came home, he told her, never mind, I've already killed the cat. And so that shows an ideation that he's, have an intention to kill things. And at this instance, it's the cat. Research and planning, Barton had carefully planned a wing of destruction. Like it was shown in the timeline, it was date after date. Preparation, bathtub and owning 4 handguns. The way he killed his 2 kids, he smacked them on the head with a hammer, and then he drowned them in a bathtub full of water.
They were asleep.
Yeah, and so he knew that a lot of people can survive severe neck injuries, and sometimes they can still have conscience. And so he made sure he drowned them in the water to make sure they won't wake up in pain. So that was part of his plan. It was a well-planned thing. And Breach, he had a normal conversation in the office when after he killed Lei Ann, the next night he killed his 2 kids, and then the next morning he went to Momentum Securities first, company where he traded, and he had a normal conversation with them before he actually put up his guns and started the killing spree. And the attack, and then after killing at Momentum Securities, he walked across the street to All-Tech, another building, and passed the security guard, and then he said something before he actually engaged in the violence. And
Yep.
Oh, you already explained it.
so one of the things, so one of the things he told when he went to Momentum Securities, he met a guy outside and he told him, "Are you gonna stick around for the flat path?" And that guy thought he was just joking, but then he went inside the office and he wanted to reopen an account and wrote a check of $5,000, but the check bounced back. And then he said, today it's a bad trading day and it's gonna get worse. And then that's when he put the guns and started shooting people.
Wow.
Thank you, you're 15 minutes. Oh, all right. Final exam, 10 o'clock on Wednesday. You have